one. I'm going to do a bunch of framing on reparations, set a metric for this debate. Then we're going to talk about what people lose during an expulsion, why people who were stolen from deserve the financial restitution, why people who were treated horribly and discriminatingly for their religion deserve reparations for the hardships they face, why these people continue to suffer from bad conditions as a result of the expansion, and why they deserve our support in helping them overcome their past hardship. Let's get into it, starting with our framing on reparations. Reparations are the mitigation of harm and acceptance of blame for horrendous crimes committed against an ethnic group in the past. What are the criteria for when reparations must be made? When the victims are alive, when their material conditions are still actively harmed by the crimes committed against them, and when the payer of reparations actively benefits from those crimes. Even if only some of these are true, like with Black Americans, we still believe they should be paid reparations, but in this case, like after the Holocaust, all of them are true. What doesn't preclude the paying of reparations? What state the victims are now in? We pay it to the individuals and not to the states that they live in. Whether they're in our state or in Turkey, we have to pay it back to them. But secondly, it doesn't matter whether that state or other people from the harmed ethnicity or religion did bad things to us. So crimes by the Ottoman Empire to Bulgarians don't excuse crime by post-communist Bulgaria towards Muslims. Note, those Muslims weren't even necessarily Turks. They were Bulgarians, as in Slavic people who were converted to Islam after centuries of rule by the Ottomans, which means that these people got this horrible punishment merely for the faith they chose to believe in. Our metric for this debate: we don't think these people deserve it because it's Turkey. We don't think it's relevant if the relationship between Turkey and Bulgaria improves. This house believes that motion. We're not from the perspective of Turkey nor Bulgaria. All we care about is about whether these people deserve reparations, whether the benefit to them would be significant and whether it would be illegitimate to not give it to them. Let's start then with what you lose during an expulsion. Go ahead.
Can you give some sort of mechanism of how much reparations, who's going to receive them, are there any criteria?
We're going to do to make it as close as possible to the original whatever they lost, so the value of the property and belongings that they lost. What do you lose during an expulsion? First, your loss of home, the place you grew up in, the place that gives you shelter, the place that keeps you safe, the place where you intended to raise your kids. Second, you lose your community, the people that you grew up around, the town square, the mosque, the hundreds of years of joint history that you have together. It's the loss of your job or your business, and you're forced to transition to a new job. Not every Soviet neuroscientist who moved to Israel got to remain a doctor. Some of them ended up as janitors, but anyone who owned a business necessarily lost that business. But it even looks like loss of life. The process of an expulsion of 300,000 people, there, like in the Nakba here, necessarily comes with murder, with rape, with pillaging. These people were stolen from. Why do they therefore deserve the financial restitution? We're looking at significant loss. Loss of property, loss of businesses and homes, loss of all the belongings left in the homes. Even the few goods and belongings that people took with them were pillaged from them during the expulsion when they couldn't protect themselves or hold on to their own jewelry. Why is this important? First, we believe states have an obligation to oppose and punish theft and protect people's basic rights to property. That means that if someone is a victim of theft, I have to restitute that victim after catching the criminal and taking back what was stolen. This is especially true in a case if the state directly benefited. In this case, the benefits are spread across all ethnic Bulgarians. That is, 300,000 people's homes and the entire value held within them were passed into Bulgarians who continued to pay taxes, benefit in the economy, increase their own well-being and that of their children, etc. But secondly, we also believe that states are responsible for the actions of their people. They exercise a monopoly on the ability to both punish and educate them. This looks like if I'm handicapped as a result of a crime, the government, the state, pays me a stipend depending on my lost income. If a citizen does a crime in another country, their home country is held accountable for it. It looks like Israelis using lower denomination Israeli coins that happen to be the same size as European coins in casinos all across Europe in order to just fill them up with coins that are worth far less. Those countries took those bunches of coins that Israelis were cheating with, brought them to the Israeli embassy, and demanded that the Israeli embassy pay them back. Countries get to do this because legally, if someone is in another country, my only mechanism of getting to them is through their country. But beyond that, we think that these people were not just stolen from, but were treated horribly for their religion and deserve reparations. This looks like targeting them specifically because of the faith that they were born into and that they practice, not any harm that they committed to anyone else. This is one of the worst things we can imagine, causing such horrible crime to people because of their religion. As Jews, this might sound familiar to you. This looks like the loss and destruction of communities, mosques that have stood for hundreds of years, the dismantling of villages, the rehoming of Slavic people to erase the previous identity of these places. Many of these places existed for hundreds of years as Muslim towns with rich cultures, foods, unique Bulgarian Muslim ethnicities, and they lost it. Why is it so important? We believe everyone deserves freedom of belief and to avoid persecution. We don't believe that our moral obligation to not persecute people and to treat them equally regardless of their religion ends at the moment after a crime is committed. Our obligation to repay them, to make it right, and to restitute them still stands. Finally, these people continue to suffer from bad conditions. Before that, POI.
When somebody commits a crime, generally we punish the perpetrator, not give money to the victim.
If you're able to show me that on your side you can punish all of the perpetrators of these crimes, take the money away from them, and give it to these people, I support that. Reparations from Bulgaria is the closest thing we can come to that. Sorry if I just made you rethink your whole case. Okay, these people continue to suffer from bad conditions and deserve support to help them overcome this past hardship. This looks like a cycle of poverty since 1990. You lack a home, so you have to pay rent. You have leaks in it. You lack belongings, so you have to take loans to get new belongings or get by without those goods. You don't have access to services. You lack a business, so you have to be a worker in someone else's business, earning significantly less. You don't have a community to support you because you're not an ethnic Turk. You're an outsider. You're a Bulgarian Muslim. Why can support help? First, we have practical needs that we can solve right now. People who can't afford healthcare or who can't afford a roof over their head because of this crime, we give it to them. But secondly, we uniquely give them a way to lift out of poverty over the generations. To make sure that their kids have better conditions than they did, have access to a job, to higher education, to ensuring their own material success for the rest of their lives. Because this was a horrendous crime and those can't go ignored and forgotten. Go with opening government.
Open you! Open you!
One point in the speech on the signaling to Muslims who currently live as a minority in Bulgaria and why their lives actually get better. I think that directly clashes and takes down the issue on backlash. Before that, though, a lot of rebuttal. So, firstly, two things just to point out here. On the idea that it costs money, A, we think this ignores the principal responsibility. That is to say, their claim of, oh, well, we can win just on it being illegitimate. We think if we win the legitimacy clash, i.e. that it is a moral obligation, it does not matter that it costs the state money because it is money they stole and they therefore must return. But secondly, we just think much of this actually serves as a stimulus. That is to say, half of these people, by now a little bit more I think, are actually living in Bulgaria. They are often poor Bulgarians. They are also people who feel disenfranchised and are likely to contribute a lot more. So while yes, it may not be the most direct use of funds, they can't claim that this is a complete misallocation of funds because we think for the most part a lot of this money is going back into people who need it within the country anyway. And lastly, just note, it is not an actor motion. That is to say, any claims that they have of why Bulgarians are more important, if it's a question of citizenship or the government took responsibility for them, then I can't simply kick out the poor citizens and then not have responsibility for them. Bulgaria itself did that. And if it's a claim of, well, actor Bulgaria should care more about them, we don't care. This debate is from a global perspective. We think these people can be just as poor and need the money just as much and obviously deserve it a lot more, regardless of what Bulgaria would like to do. Now, they try to claim, firstly, that we should punish the perpetrator. Obviously, this is not mutually exclusive, and when we can, we punish the perpetrator and have him return the things. But secondly, we really think that the Bulgarian government literally is the perpetrator. Yes, the Soviet bloc dissolved. They kind of had a weak sort of form of government, unclear exactly how much they were elected. We don't think this means they're not at all responsible for a couple of reasons. Because we think that, first of all, it's not entirely true that it was an autocracy in the sense that these were the people who were in positions of power. These people got there because of local support, even if it wasn't organized elections. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, the leader of CERN now, the largest party in the Bulgarian parliament, got his job because he was active then and had those connections. That is to say, it is those same people who have perpetuated the power structure and allowed for them to maintain power, and therefore, we think they absolutely are responsible. But also note the absurdity of OO's claim of like, oh, well, this metric has to be that it's the exact same people. Note, Obviously, Nazi Germany was not still the Nazi party, and they didn't identify with them when they paid reparations. You never pay reparations when you're still the people who are perpetrating the crime. We think, obviously, the point is that you nevertheless bear responsibility for things that were done under your country, because yes, it's the same banner, and yes, someone should pay for it. A, we think in Bulgaria it is literally the same actor, but B, we still think it's the most proximate actor. We think at the point at which we've proven that this money is deserved to the people who were harmed by it, we think we're good enough, even if we just prove this is the most proximate, the most liable, and the most capable of paying of any actor that we have in this debate. Then they actually try to justify it. And while I know Omar likes to call people racists in debate, I think he's absolutely justified here. Their claims of, oh, well, the Muslims could potentially have been spies. They have dual loyalty. They have their own religion. Again, sound very much like things that were said about the Jews that are said about just about every ethnic minority, where yes, they have another religion. We don't think that that is a necessary justification or one that meets any sort of legitimacy criterion to say these people speak another language, therefore they have the potential to be spies, therefore let us kick them out of our country. And we think that at the point at which OO doesn't prove legitimacy for the act, it doesn't matter whether the chances were 5 or 10%. These people are not actors of war. They're not soldiers. There's no legitimacy to kick them out at that point. And then, yeah, we also think the only way they then do it is based on ethnicity. That is to say, if it is only someone who has the capacity because he speaks another language and has another religion, that is literally just racism for the sake of racism. Meaning we don't think that they have credible grounds of some sort of reason to do this other than the people's ethnicity. We think that in itself is a crime against humanity. And also note, the claim that it was because of their religion and therefore it's grounded, we just don't think that works. Yes, it works for Muslims in a lot of countries today. It did not work for Muslims who had been living in Bulgaria for generations and who went through the Soviet era there, where essentially religion took a backseat everywhere and your local ethnicity, that is to say, the culture around you and the culture of the state, was much, much stronger. We don't think that these people were pushing for any sort of theocracy, nor did they believe that they need to put Turkey in the forefront. We just don't think that's based in any sort of reality. And I think that's it as far as rebuttal. No, one more thing. They also claim for some people it ended up good and that's cool. We don't think that matters. Obviously, we don't think it's true for most people, but we also think that if I wrongfully terminate your employment because I don't like the color of your skin, and then you get offered a better job, I nevertheless have to pay you reparations because I wronged you. Therefore, we can't judge this on outcomes. We need to judge it on the metric of the act that was done to them, and we were very clear on this and did not get sufficient response. This was an entirely illegitimate act. Now, let's talk about signaling to the Muslim minority. Anyone want a POI first? No? Cool. Okay, so we have a significant minority of Muslims in this country right now. Many of them feel wronged, many of them feel robbed. Note, they all lived under the Ottoman Empire. They don't necessarily identify as Turks. We don't think the people then did either. They nevertheless feel wronged because they know what was happening. These are people who harbor feelings of anger. Yeah, go.
If they feel so wronged, why did they go back?
Because that was still where their home was. Why do you think there are some Palestinians who still live under the Israeli, whatever Omar is going to call it and use fancier words than I have, and more true outrage? But we think people have this connection to their homeland. It doesn't mean that they were treated right. So, we think this creates much better integration and buy-in. Why is this the unique metric to do so? Because it is actual admission of guilt in addition to economic stimulus. That is to say, it gives people both the means to contribute to society, to all of a sudden work, to have jobs, to have stable income, to work, to make things better, and to pay taxes and to be part of their country, but also in the same exact movement gives them the motivation to do so. It tells them that this country is willing to turn over a new leaf, to say, look, we wronged these people, we do not believe it's okay. Now, OO tries to clash with this by saying, oh, backlash. Let's be very clear here. Firstly, the conditions are not great today, so any delta on backlash is much more minor because these people are already an ethnic minority who don't do that well in Bulgaria. But secondly, cool. For enough money, I'd take that. I honestly don't understand why they think they can win on some people will be upset when we have an ethnic minority that is not liked anyway. But now they are given power, empowered and incentivized to actually make changes, to have a lot more political clout, but also just to care, to be more patriotic, and therefore have people feel like they're more part of the country anyway. For all of these reasons, opening government.
Two major clashes of the top half, and I think of the remaining debate are likely to, as it's likely to play out, are whether this is an obligation, legitimate action, spoilers, it isn't. And second, whether the consequences of this would be a net positive. And note, we think that the relevant actors of who are affected by this are not just the people receiving reparations, but also all of the people paying the reparations and how they are going to be affected, which are all the taxpayers in Bulgaria. Also note an important thing, the fact that this isn't an ACTA motion doesn't mean that I don't get to prioritize Bulgaria's moral obligation to its own citizens in the same way OG tried to prioritize its moral obligation to people that it harmed. Yes, if they think moral obligation to a certain party is relevant, it is relevant on our side to the same extent. We are also affecting more people, and since it's not an ACTA motion, I don't care just about the people who were harmed, I care about everybody and the effects on all of them, and I am prioritizing them within this debate. Let's give some responses to things that we heard. First on, oh, but this is basically stimulus into Bulgaria because half of them live there. So A, inherently, at least half of this is being wasted, right? Because it's not stimulus into Bulgaria. Second, this is obviously a very inefficient stimulus into Bulgaria. A, because I don't know why direct money transfers are a good way of stimulating your country or improving its status and its economy. I think that's actually a very inefficient way, and we've seen this in many states that tried stimulus over COVID. It often leads to inflation and worse issues. Second, because it's not being allocated in a way that makes any economic sense. It's being allocated based on race and history and not based on ethnicity and history, and not based on whether these are people in need or how they use it. Maybe some proportion of them are in need. I don't know that all of them are, and I don't think this is an efficient system. So it's clearly still extremely wasteful. Next on this idea of, oh, well, taking money from the perpetrator is not mutually exclusive. It's not about whether it's mutually exclusive. It's about whether, because we can't take from them, is it right to then punish someone who isn't responsible? If I can't find the perpetrator of a crime, I don't pick someone off the street and say, well, you make up for it then, it's your fault. And we think that this is what is being done, but even worse, because we're actually applying it to victims. What are we told? Oh, they were responsible. It wasn't entirely an autocracy. The current leader apparently is only in power because of this. I think this is asserted, not because it is a fact. It is possible that it isn't true in the real world anyway, but regardless of the fact, it is asserted that this is the reason that individual currently has power. That is a theory that maybe some people subscribe to. I don't think it is proven. And next, I think that it is also impossible to prove that this is a choice of the Bulgarian people, given the very limited state of the democracy within Bulgaria, and even now the very limited ability that they have of affecting political outcomes, since they have a corrupt system, a judiciary that, as we all know, is very bad, is not independent and isn't capable of overseeing what the government is doing, and generally speaking, the general public isn't capable of actually making these decisions and affecting who is in power and who is doing things. So we think to all of this, clearly, they are not, the general public cannot be held responsible, and they are the one paying the price. What are we told of? Oh, well, Germany post-war wasn't the Nazi party. Yes, but Germany voted the Nazis to power and didn't resist significantly when realistically they could have. The Nazis were a minority within their state and they had the ability and were not a foreign oppressor. Bulgaria was overtaken by a foreign invader that was threatening them with death and taking control of all of their government and all of their means, and then turned into a communist state where the citizens were under threat of expulsion and death. Yes, they were significantly less capable of preventing the harms than the Germans, not responsible for the harms that occurred, and were in fact victims of this situation. Insofar of even if it ended up good, it was still wrongful to do it, and therefore we still owe reparations. But there has to be some sort of cutoff of the extent of harm done to an individual before a state should bother paying reparations to them. Because as Yishai points out, otherwise we're constantly paying reparations to anyone and no state would ever function. We need some cutoff. So significantly reducing the extent to which we believe there were harms occurred to them, and that maybe even many of them benefit from this because they left the state in disrepair and that was not going to function, where they were being persecuted to a state where they were likely to do better off, then that does mean that we don't achieve that cutoff of harms that justify reparations. Lastly, on this idea of if they came back, that doesn't necessarily mean that they forgave or that they feel that the harm that was done to them wasn't so severe, because here's the justification: the Palestinians still live in Israel. First off, huge difference between still live and took active action to return. Still living, there's all the limitations of it. It's hard to leave and you don't want to, and the home hasn't been tainted as significantly. Once you've been taken away and your memory of the home is having been expelled, if you're returning to it, clear that because you think the expulsion wasn't that bad or it is worthwhile to you, and we don't think that it's and we think that this proves a lot more. Before I get into my weighings, closing.
Right. So the reason we punish Pinochet in Chile is not necessarily because he did or did not have democratic resistance, but because he murdered thousands of women. So the reason we give reparations to these people is not whether there was like yes or no Soviet invasion, but because they committed a crime.
I think that the question is, who committed the crime? The Bulgarian people did not commit the crime. The Bulgarian, if they did commit the crime in some roundabout way, they did not do it with free will. They were coerced into it and therefore still are not responsible for having committed the crime. I don't think that that stands. Why do we think that A, this obligation of legitimacy is the most important thing to the debate? We think A, it does precede outcome to a large extent, but also the likelihood of this being a truth of relevant to it is guaranteed, and it is unique to this solution action. So making the lives of these individuals better is possible through better policies in Bulgaria and making Bulgaria generally more prosperous and helping them. This isn't true of, but if this is wrong and a wrong way of taking money from the Bulgarians, this isn't true. We think that most of the positive outcomes are very minor and mostly symbolic, and in fact, what they symbolize and create are negative consequences. We think that the backlash created is far worse than the small monetary reparations, and let's be realistic, it can't be very large given the economic state of Bulgaria and the amount of money that they can currently divide amongst 300,000 separate individuals, and so therefore, this is mostly a symbolic issue, but the symbol is going to create a lot of ire and frustration and anger, because these individuals that we already dislike are now actively harming us and taking money from the state that should be invested into us when we are currently in a bad economic state ourselves, and they are no worse off than I am. I am also was oppressed. I also don't have access to money. Why are they getting a handout? This is precisely when there's more discrimination. This is when there are lost job opportunities. There's less funding and less policy that is supportive of these communities, and these are more significant harms than the benefit of a little bit of money. But also the primary obligation is to the Bulgarians. They are the residents who pay taxes. Yes, residents, not citizens. Maybe Yishai misspoke, not crucial. They have no culpabilities and they were victims themselves. Please oppose.
Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about Palestinians. I'm going to give you two extensions. I'm going to firstly explain to you why we win on the practical, also benefiting all of the Bulgarians, but also the real Bulgarians that I want to talk about. And then I'm also going to prove to you why our analysis is going to win us. The analysis on more integrations are going to win us also the principal clash about agency restoration, why we come closer to solving and restoring what we have taken from these people than OG actually gave you. For that, a few points of rebuttal. Firstly, about this whole point of OO, about, look, the Bulgarians at the time were coerced into fighting these people and actually explaining all of these things. This analysis proves indeed that the Bulgarians in 1989 should not have restored. This is modern day, 2023. The analysis does not apply. The intuition here is this. I coerce Franka to steal Ido's car and give it to me. Now Franka removed the gun from my head. I still have the car. Do I have the obligation to return the car? Of course I do, because even though at the time I did not have the ability to actually fight the action, now I have the ability to make it right and actually return to the car to who it belongs to. This is exactly the same case. I think this is a weird logic to argue. Secondly, about the last thing that we heard about the amount, yes, Ayal did not give us a clear map, but he did say we're going to restore as much as we harmed. Listen to Ayal's dramatic rhetoric. He told you that they were harmed a lot, therefore the amount is likely to be very big. And furthermore than this, OO cannot claim, people will be extremely pissed off over like a few schnickels or whatever they use in Bulgaria. Lastly, about backlash, they tell us, now other people will be mad, there will be backlash, because why do I not get restoration of funds even though I am poor but they get? You do get restoration of funds. This is called income tax. We tax the rich and give it to the poor. If you are poor, you are getting the same restoration. We have wronged you again, therefore you are getting more money. Let's talk about integration. We think you get significantly more integration on our side of the house for a few reasons. Firstly, we think that directly because this influx of cash that you are going to get, you are going to invest it more in your society. This looks like, firstly, investing more in your own businesses. We think that today, they don't have enough money to invest, and like OG rightfully say, they're employed for other people, right? Credit for them. But we say they will develop the ability to be self-sufficient, right? Investing in the businesses of the community itself, standing on their own legs. But secondly, we say say this will create also investing hubs, right? Like the money coming from Qatar to Ramallah, now this is an investing hub. Also, other people are coming to these investing hubs from different ethnic nationalities in order to work there, in order to actually dine there, and all of these things. And we think this is very, very important, because if we have the money that draws in people from other ethnic nationalities, this is where you are able to integrate more people, right? Because now, when I work with someone who yesterday I thought I couldn't get along with because he has different cultures, languages, like all described all these things. Now we see that the differences are not that huge. All of us have the Bulgarian culture, the Bulgarian mentality. We are able to work together and be friends. Secondly, we say you can overcome the barriers of integration, because what is happening today, some of you might find it very similar to the situation that we are in. The state is divided by ethnic lines. Why is this the case? Firstly, because this happened not that long ago, right? Many of the people who actually suffered these atrocities are still alive today. What does this mean? This means that this narrative is still alive. The people who have suffered are still remember how the other ethnic nationality has wronged them and all of these things, right? This makes it significantly harder for them to actually ignore everything and move on with their lives. But secondly, the narrative that we can share our life with the people who have wronged us and all of these things is still alive, and therefore we are not able to change their life. And furthermore than that, actually in the recent years, the narrative in Bulgaria about this issue is the narrative about voluntary migration, right? So it's actually going in the contrary direction to actually putting out a hand and actually saying we want to make things right. Why is this motion specifically the only way, and a very effective way to solve all of these things? Because we think that for the first time since these atrocities has happened, the state of Bulgaria that is responsible for the atrocities that these people have been through does two things in this act. Firstly, it for the first time in history acknowledges that it has wronged the Muslims that it has expelled. Secondly, it for the first time tries to make it right? We say that, yes, maybe we cannot give you your homes, but this is the most approximate things that we can give. Why is this very important? Because who is the receiving audience of this message of the state? These are people who want to be Bulgarians. These are people who want to reintegrate, and therefore they are likely to take this opportunity to be back as a part of the Bulgarian state. Why is this the case? Because firstly, as per the info slide, many of them came back to Bulgaria, i.e. they still feel this sense of nationality. But secondly, all of them, even the one who stayed in Turkey, still upheld their Bulgarian culture and their Bulgarian narratives in all of these things. This means that they still identify as Bulgarians. They want to believe the state, they want to be a part of, but as per today, we think that they cannot be a part because they feel alienated all of the time from the state, and this is a unique way to actually putting out a hand and giving the opportunity. Closing.
Did they go back to Bulgaria because the economic situation was better, or because they are culturally connected?
Different families are different, probably case by case. What does this do in the debate? Why this is very important? Firstly, as per the effect on the people who were expelled themselves, we say we have proven to you better than OG, better impacts on themselves. Why? Because OG tell you that they will be good in the short term. We have proven to you long-term, self-sufficient and self-feeding impacts that also lost to the long term. Therefore, we simply prove a larger impact. But secondly, to the Bulgarians themselves that OO are worried about. When you have a poor community that is not self-sufficient, is reliant on the state, all of the time they are costing the dear Bulgarians of OO more money in the welfare state. Now when they are self-sufficient, they cost less, and therefore will flip all of their arguments in. But lastly, on the principle, we think that the main thing that these people were robbed from is agency, not the land itself, right? Listen to Ayal's analysis. Ayal's analysis are all of the things, the house, the culture, all of these things that we use as tools of agency to fulfill ourselves. Therefore, this is the real thing that we were robbed from, and Ayal only describes the tools. Therefore, when we give them the tools to now rebuild their life, reshape their life in the way that they want, we are able to use this tool as a tool of agency restoration, and therefore we become more closer to actually repairing the wrongs that we have done. For all of these reasons, support.
One. Two main extensions from closing oppositions. A was going to create significant backlash, and despite Yishai's promises, didn't do very much analysis at all. And second, why it's going to emotionally harmful to the Muslims themselves when you put a monetary value and probably a low one on their suffering and on the story they are telling. But before, let's understand what this is going to do in the debate. First, we're going to flip it and show you that these reparations are actually harmful to Muslims and that the Muslims expelled coming back. There's two key things. A, it shows us that we have no moral obligation whatsoever, because if we are going to do something that's harmful to them, obviously it cannot be a correction for previous harms, right? Harming people further can't solve the previous harm. But secondly, it's obviously going to win on the utilitarian metric of whether we are helping more people. Because if we are harming even the Muslims themselves, when both sides agree there is some harm to the other Bulgarians who are costing them money, except from TG, we'll get to them in direct rebuttal in a second, then obviously we're doing overall more harm than any other group can show. Two direct rebuttals to CG. The first one is CG has remarkably solved poverty. If we just give everybody a lump sum payment, they will suddenly become brilliant businessmen and investors and will never need any money again, right? This is the basic idea of the argument, right? You're getting one lump sum payment of reparations and you're going to find your agency, you're going to know what to do with this money, this is going to succeed. It's very, very unlikely. Most people who get one lump sum payment use it to buy something they wanted, a TV, to get a down payment for borrowing a car. They use it for something they know in their day-to-day life that they wanted because they suddenly feel rich, like they have a lot of money, and they not suddenly become brilliant businessmen that can do so. But more than, we think the idea that this money is going to be a significant sum is just very, very weird, right? On two levels. First of all, the idea is proportional to the damage that was caused to them, and the things that were taking them was all very little money, as everybody agrees. They're suffering, but suffering is evaluated compared to the wealth of the nation of the people who are suffering it, right? Bulgaria is not a rich nation. And while the total sum might be large and therefore cause very strong emotions in Bulgaria, the sum per individual is going to be small. It's 300,000 people. Even if you give $1,000 to each of them, that's $300 million. This is a very large sum in Bulgarian terms, but it's a very small sum in individual terms, right? $1,000 is just not taking you very far in any way, shape, or form, and it's definitely not taking care of you for the rest of your life or granting you some massive amount of agency you didn't have under any other circumstance. However, the stickier number overall, everybody who is not you is going to use, not the number you are going to get individually, is how much it costs the nation as a total. This is a much bigger number. It's much more impressive on an individual level. Let's start with the first case about backlash, and let's be clear about what opening opposition gave you in backlash. What opening opposition gave you in backlash is basically the following. Some people have incentive to try and create tensions with Muslims, right? Because they are right-wing, because it's going to be helpful to them politically, but they didn't give you anything significant about it. They didn't give you two key things for this. A, why they need the specific reparations to create this tension, right? Why can they play on other things why this is so impactful? And second, why it's going to have a long-run impact, right? So we're going to have a wave of backlash. Why this is going to change that was for a significant and harmful way. Let's start with why it's so significant. Because this is an issue that, unlike most other issues, is very trivializable and very easy to make personal for every single Bulgarian, right? Because all the commentators today is we are taking money out of your pocket, right? They don't have to tell you anything about what those people are harming you. You're probably living in a somewhat segregated fashion, probably living away from you. They don't have to tell anything about what they're going to do. They're going to tell you, yes, you're losing money for what they're doing, and this is harming you directly, and it's nothing, that's not your fault. And they're going to say it's not your fault. Regardless of whether we accept opening a position or not, they're just going to make this special because it makes them sound better. But on a more second level, I think it's important in this debate, it's important to understand that the moment you make this lump sum payment that is going to go to them, they're all going to remember all the things that has happened to Bulgarians that they didn't get reparations for, regardless of whether they're equitable or not, right? Now you can drudge up all the events that Muslims have harmed Bulgarians in the past, and there are lots of them, because there's a long history of Ottoman occupation against them, that can now be brought to the front and be compared to that. Right? So not only are they able to make it personal, they're able to make it comparable and tell them you are getting an unfair and personally bad treatment. And why is this going to be significant impact? I think because people are already primed to have significant anti-Muslim hate in this place, right? I don't even expel them to the first place if they love them so much to begin with, but second because there's a strong narrative throughout Europe of the far right acting against Muslims and saying they're harming their countries that's going today, right now, through all those countries. All of this means they're going to be very ready to accept it, right? There are going to be instances of casual racism. It's going to normalize much farther right and much more extreme conversation about how bad it is. It's going to normalize casual ideas of, yes, they are terrorists, yes, they are traitors, yes, they are acting against our government, yes, we cannot trust them. And what happens once you normalize a conversation is you can't take it back, right? Once you bring extremists into the conversation, say, yeah, this is fine people, we can interview them, we're okay with listening to them, like happened with Idam al-Bangir in Israel, right? The moment you bring them in, it's very hard to remove them from the spotlight, right? We are now willing to interview them. We are going to be hearing his opinion more and more. We are getting used to hearing his opinion and how it's going to happen. But more than that, we are going to create media personalities and structure, and people gain fame by taking these actions. And because this is their career, this is what they are going to do, this is how they progress into permanence, they are going to keep doing this, right? This is what their skill, this is what they know, this is what they have to contribute to the general conversation. So they're going to keep doing this for decades longer, not just a blip of backlash, but it's going to stay. Before I continue, OG?
Yeah. We showed why these people were harmed by Bulgaria, and unless you think there were more than 300,000 autocrats who acted without the people were involved. So while we think our mechanisms on practicality that CG still work, even if not, we simply harmed them, they deserve it.
Okay, you harm them, they deserve to be harmed again. Does not sound to me like a very good argument. If it convinces the panel, good for you. Okay, let's understand that apart from the backlash that we are going to have, we are also not giving them any sense of closure, because no matter how much money we are going to give them, and even if we accept government position that we are giving them a lot of money, this is still not going to be enough, because on the most basic level, first of all, it's an emotional issue for them, right? The emotional and sentimental value of the communities they lost, of the houses they lost, is much greater than the monetary value, right? So that any amount of money you can give them back is much smaller than what it cost them, but more than that, because 3 decades have passed. This means they have built stories and told their families and told future generations on how things are great and how much they have lost, and those stories tend to lose track of reality the farther away you get from them, right? Because you start believing in the idea of how well you have done. You start believing in the story you're telling yourself of exactly how much you lost and how good it was for you before they took everything away from you. Because you want to believe things were good. You want to remember what you've lost in a positive light, right? You have a sense of nostalgia to it. And this means that whatever they give you back will never be able to equal and live up to this story. It will never be able to live up and equal to the emotions you have built up to this thing. But more than that, within the moment you do that, you are changing national conversation in Bulgaria, because everybody else around you expects you to feel a sense of closure, right? From the Bulgarian perspective, they have given you this money to give you closures for all of those issues that happen, right? This is what governments are telling you. What is going to happen? You're not going to feel a sense of closure. Not only are you not going to feel a sense of closure, there is going to be no understanding from the Bulgarians around you, because they all expect you not to feel a sense of closure, right? You can only complain, even the most liberal and supportive circles, nobody will understand why you are not happy with what you have got, why you can't get over it now that we've actually given it the pressures, why you cannot move on, why we can't be done with this conversation. And for all those reasons, we call on you to oppose.
At the end of this speech, you will understand why Omar has proven to you exactly not just why this is principally just and general punishment, but why this form of reparation is exactly addressing the harm that the Bulgarian Muslims have faced, and why therefore it is necessary. And secondly, while it will reintegrate most Bulgarian citizens, both Muslim and any other religion, better into that society and create probably less racism and less tension, because now not only are these people, no longer are those people not just separated by the fact that some harm has been done, but there's also no explicit visuality anymore of the separation, because one particular group that is also from another religion is also consistently poorer, has consistently less education, and is consistently doing less well in society. And by giving them a form of reparation, these are the kind of things we can exactly fix, therefore winning on both extensions. Before I'm doing that, 2 points of framing and then 2 points of rebuttal to each team. 2 points of framing, the punishment and justice thing, because I really want to get this out of the way. Nobody here understands how punishment and justice works. We punish people because they have committed a crime that is unrepairable usually, and we want to show that that thing has been bad towards people. The problem with punishing government usually is that politics are involved, and that often when the government hasn't been entirely defeated, it's really hard to punish a government that is still in power. Hence why the Nazis were punished the moment when they lost power. Not because the German public voted them in or some kind of weird rhetoric that's happening on this side, but one, because we could, and second, because they did crimes. Often, in for example Latin America, we actually didn't punish Pinochet. Why? Because we couldn't. But what we did do was give reparations to the mothers who lost their daughters who were raped or killed because some form of injustice was done, and the international community thought that the moment a government does injustice to you, that very government needs to take responsibility that it's harmed the citizens of its state, to whom by their very citizenship they have the obligation to protect them. The word citizen here is important because these people were citizens and therefore they deserved equal treatment under that state which they were denied. The reason why this is bad also, just to add a tiny impact here, is not just because they lost that, but because other than Yishai's entire fantasy history of the Ottoman Empire, the Turks didn't embrace them with open arms, but because of the separation of religion and state in that country, they were often seen as still foreigners for the very fact that they didn't want to give up their citizenship and they couldn't just reintegrate in the Turkish country, which also means that over years they got lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to any other form that they couldn't do. Going directly then into the rebuttal. First, on closing. 1. oh, but they don't know what to do with money, they'll just buy a TV. I'm not really sure why suddenly all Muslim Bulgarians have gone stupider than debaters, but I'm pretty sure that most families who are poor want their kids to go to education to create a better future for themselves. I'm the prime example of this. Second, it won't be a lot of money for the person, but it will be a lot of money for the state. This is reverse logic. Usually states have more money than people. I think that usually states actually have money to give or make bigger oopsies, but also the money that they didn't spend on these people because they denied them education is the same money that they can spend on them now for giving them that very education. For these people, that usually matters a lot more. 3. Why, well, now they're all right-wing and there will be huge backlash. This is a point on both sides. The reason why a lot of Muslims in Bulgaria are right-wing is because they're consistently more poor than their leftist or often more liberal people. Usually, well-off people who go to university are a little bit more leftist than the people who are not. Look at all debaters who often go to Oxford or Cambridge versus people that don't. But also look in general into society, the better off you are, the less hatred you have. Omar already says that a lot of times the people that are so against this or the people that are so explicitly opposed to other parts of society are the people that consistently feel wronged by what's happening. Those are often the Muslims that still remember that their cousin isn't living next to them because their family was expulsed. I don't think there is a massive amount of racism in Bulgaria right now from the side of the Christians who still believe it was voluntary, who didn't get denied any form of huge right. And when Yishai wants to go, oh, but somewhere 100 years ago, the Turks and the Ottoman Empire, this was 20 years ago, the kind of expulsion we talk about. The Ottoman Empire was hundreds of years ago. Usually Bulgaria doesn't have a huge history with it. They just don't want to get too close to Turkey, and that's not necessarily because of religious rights, but often more political autonomy, because the Ottoman Empire was many things, but it did have some form of religious freedom. Let's actually read our history books. Cool. Into our own case. This was already the rebuttal to opening opposition. I think our own case integrated with the whole principle point. What does Omar tell you and why we win on a principle framing? The first is the moral obligation part on why he punishes people. I already gave you the introduction on saying, why we don't punish these people, why we pay them back. I already gave you the introduction on saying there is a point where you repair the harms that you've done, especially if those harms are quite tangible and you need to give these things back. The second reason is because these people were citizens and therefore they couldn't get any other rights in any other countries than just your own, which is another part of that principle. But the third one is that a lot of the harms that they have faced are exactly, for example, the ones that Yishai tries to deny and saying, oh, but otherwise you could have gone to healthcare. Yeah, the very healthcare that these people didn't get because they were expulsed from the country and denied rights and robbed of their possessions, which limited the funds that they had, which is why we need to give them money in order to reintegrate. But on the practical level, I think that Omar does an even better job in explaining to you why this will lead to better integration of these people. The reason why there's racism right now is because there's not just inequality between them because of some history chapter, but because that inequality is visible. Because these people are consistently poor. Because these people vote for a different party because they're consistently poor and they don't get included into the government. Because they have because they're excluded from that society because they lost all their possessions and they had to go to different schools and their families are living in different countries because they were excluded and no one is addressing it. The moment you allow these people to actually say, we did you wrong, which also means that the state needs to say and address that this kind of thing happened, is the moment where you reintegrate them. Go on.
Fair return logic is dependent on the Bulgarians currently benefiting from the expulsion. This is very tenuous, and even if there is a tiny benefit, far less than the extent of reparations harm.
I don't
Still unjust by all Bulgarians.
Thank you. I don't need to say Bulgarians benefited from the expulsion. I just have to say that comparatively, citizens who deserved the same kind of treatment that they didn't get were worse off than them. That is to say, I don't benefit in the sense that that my country has plundered other countries, but I do think that there are many other people who could have been better if they hadn't done that, and that is why I think that that is a principle that you need to do. But practically, especially if those people live in my own country right now and they're consistently poor, that's when you create racism. The people that are racist in the Netherlands, for example, aren't the people who are well off, it's the people who are also poor because they feel that other poor Muslims are taking their job. Usually they're having a lot better time integrating Muslims that go to university, or actually are doing better because they think that those people are better to do for the entire society. This is why I think integration works better. You create more incentives to create a better narrative, you create more incentives to properly integrate these people in society. For all these reasons, please propose.
Look, we think that there are two questions in this debate. Here we have the utility and the effect of the minority. We have the legitimacy of do they deserve it or not. We think that the utility one is just way more important than the question about deserving. two reasons. First, we think that one of the main reasons that Ayal gave you in his amazing framing was that you need to make sure that it's going to benefit the people. Meaning, benefiting is actually utility. Meaning, you need to prove it. You're actually causing them more utility, more happiness, more help, etc. While meaning that this depends on the clash of utility. But second, obviously, even if some things you need to, it depends on the amount of effect you're doing. Obviously, if it's going to cause the entire state to collapse, like, taking it to the extreme, no one will say that we need to do it, because it's going to cause lots of harm. Meaning that the amount of harm that you are creating is something that affects the amount of legitimacy that we have. Because we've shown to you that they are going to cause lots of harm to the Muslim who got expelled, to the Muslim who didn't get expelled, are going to stay there and are innocent from anything. We are winning on the important clash and winning overall the debate. Let's start. I think that Roy explained two major impacts over those Muslims. First, we are going to have significant backlash, but not only significant backlash, but a long-term backlash. We are going to change the norms. We are going to now have kids who hear their parents said nasty things or talk in racist about the Muslim. We're going to get a new order of politicians who are taking this and advocates who are taking it as their ticket and going to change it. This didn't get from OG, the entire case of OO didn't explain why it's going to be something that's going to last more than 1 year, meaning that our explanation is why first the extent and the impact are really standing there, and why it's actually important because it's going to stay and affect every Muslim life in that state from now on. Meaning we are winning that over. But we think that by actually showing you that, we're thinking why we are significantly changing the status quo and significantly worsening the life of those Muslims. No, it's affect not only the Muslim who got expelled, but also the Muslim who stay there or have no relationship to the people who actually got expelled. And they do exist because, I don't know, as far as info, not everyone got expelled. Meaning we are hurting drastically the most innocent people who just don't get any benefit from what government wants to get, but only get the harms from it. Meaning you're just hurting a lot of people. Second, you're just increasing the amount of people that you're actually hurting here, because it's not only the Muslim who might or might not be related to the repression, but it's also the new generation that didn't face this harm. It didn't face those racists. It didn't face this something, and it just, for the first time, now feeling this racist. Now, for the first time, he is feeling the looks when he's going to the street. He's now getting cut off from his friends. Meaning, we're increasing the amount of people who are actually suffering from it. People who, based on the same thing that we have from others, will later deserve another repression for this racism. I think that we're keeping this circle running over and over again, and we need to affect it. Thirdly, we just think we create a damage which is irreversible, because we are going to create, or reversible in a very, very long time, because we create this new line of people who are going to create this backlash. But we think that's more than, we think that why it's not going to actually cause this benefit for the people who actually got expelled. Because now you are telling them this is a done deal. You got anything, just don't complain anymore. Don't tell us that there is no problem. You got the money, you got your house, you got the family. You need to stop complaining. But not only that, no. The, I don't know, $100 that you got is what your family story means. All the story that you have from your grandfather worth this little amount of money. Money that can change your life currently, that you always thought that you deserve more. You always had this imagination of what this factory look like, what this house look like. You just understand that all of this sum up to something very, very slim. Meaning that you are now just a worse feeling about your story. But it's not only this, but the fact that you now just have much more incentive or ability for the state to just stop giving you other support, because they can. The politician will say, well, you got what you asked for, you got the reparation. You just can't ask for anything else. But also the public is going to demand, especially because now we have those new politicians, and meaning that other support group, other support from the EU, other social services, other memorial days or teaching in school are going to get noted that you need to stop doing that. Meaning that that while maybe some of their benefit happen, it just happened one time for, I don't know, 1 minute and then stop. On the other side, we are getting the benefit of talking about for a long time. And why do we think missing a page? Why do we think that, I will spend time first.
The change for Muslims in bank account and feelings for the state are immediate and guaranteed. The questions of backlash, whether or not it's worth more than the money, whether or not this is a tipping point, and whether or not it's so bad given all of the backlash that happens anyway to Muslims there, are really unclear as impacts in this.
Look, we think that even if the benefit is sure, it's very, very low impact. It's affected slimly in a very small way. We think that doesn't mean that the impact itself is low. We think that this is not a tipping point. We think we're talking about an extent. We're talking about more racism, about more selling industry, about more of meaning that lots of people just didn't get this harm before. You're just increasing their harm. You're causing way more harm than anything good that they can get from this man. We think that by itself explain why the effect of legitimacy that OG tried to tell you that now they're going to enjoy this admission. Just doesn't stand. They are not going to enjoy this admission. They're going to be furious about it. They're going to feel bad about it. But we also think it answers a lot of what you heard from CG, because all of CG case actually depend on the fact that they're going to, from now on, live together happily ever after. They told, oh, but now the minorities will be able to work everywhere, and immigrants are going to be able to come there and going to create hubs of immigrants. But no, if you have backlash and you don't have minorities, and everyone is staring at you and there are laws against you, no one is going to come there. You're going to suffer. You're going to probably want to live there. So you are forcing those people to actually move away from Bulgaria. At least some of them more. You're creating just more harm for them. Meaning the impact of just having better, cooperation just doesn't stand. Then they tell you, oh, but now they're going to be able to work together because they're now equal completely and they just have no reason to hate one another. First, of course, they have reason to hate one another. They feel that you took their own money. It's the money that Bulgaria, those parents who are going to pay more taxes, are going to take their home or factory, doesn't feel that they are to blame. They they explain to themselves that they shouldn't, that they aren't to blame. It's probably something that they bought from someone else, so they are actually not to blame. And they don't think that they belong to them. But secondly, we're just not sure why this equality is a requirement to actually get the cooperation between people. But even if it was, probably there are a lot of some other Muslims in those communities who aren't going to get this separation. So you're actually creating less equality in this community and causing the Muslim community by itself to become more separated from one another, with less ability to actually work with one another and continue to cooperate. So you're actually harming them also because you feel opposed.